Hi, you're watching Matthew Jensen drinking whiskey, and tonight we're going to be drinking the Bowmore 15-year-old. This is a very interesting whiskey. It's Whiskey Exchange's Whiskey of the Year for 2018, and it's got a very unique flavor profile. It's aged in Oloroso sherry casks, which are brought in from Spain. The aging in the sherry cask is just for the last 3 years of this 15-year expression. The first 12 years would probably have been done in American oak bourbon casks, which is what Scotch whiskey is traditionally aged in. The sherry casks, sherry is a dessert wine from Spain, as you're no doubt aware, impart this beautiful red chestnutty color, which should not contain any artificial colorants or any E numbers, but this is purely from the cask, soaking up some of those colors from the wood and the sherry wine that had been aged in there for years to come, because the Spanish aged the sherry for a long time too. So this is a very interesting, complex whiskey, and I'm really looking forward to reviewing this with you. I have poured some into my trusty tumbler. You can see that beautiful color, rich amber, coppery color, really glistens, and that coppery red is so present. The bouquet of this is a little bit subdued, especially for an Islay whiskey. Now, if you know your Islay whiskies, they tend to be very peated and strong on the nose. They have a lot of smokiness and saltiness that you would expect from something from a small island. And immediately on the nose, the salt is there, the smoke is there, sorry. The smoke is very present. But I do not smell a very strong note of peat. So I'm going to leave this. And I'm going to try out one of these. This is a whiskey snifter. Now this is apparently what you're supposed to drink whiskey out of. In a previous video I discussed my preference for tumblers, mainly because of how they look and feel. This doesn't quite have the same cachet as a whiskey tumbler, but I'm going to see if it does really outperform the tumbler for nosing and tasting. So here we go. As we can see, that beautiful whiskey in here again. So should about see those long legs as this very oily whiskey dribbles back down into the bowl. Right, and it's okay. So there is a lot more fragrance to appreciate in the snifter. That's a fair point. There's a lot more sweetness, some caramel notes. I'm still not sensing a lot of peat, but it is a lot more complex. You'll notice I'm sticking my nose right inside. It really does help. Sniffing like this isn't effective. You just get a hint of alcohol. You don't really get the whole fragrance. So back to number one. More smoke, more oak, more fruit, and a hint of something that almost a bit of perfume, like a touch of Old Spice. Yes, Old Spice. Right, so let's give it a taste. I'm going to taste it from the tumbler first. It's very smooth. Now at 15 years old, this whiskey is starting to get into the range of of the smoother, older whiskies. They are a bit more expensive as well when they're older. Relative bargain, this whiskey at about 45 to 50 pounds, depending on where you buy it, maybe $60. So it's quite good value for money for an older whiskey, but they are more expensive. So this whiskey is very bitter. It's got a strong bitterness that sort of gets you in the back of your throat, sort of tobacco-y, leathery kind of taste. I don't think everybody will like this. It's a very complex flavor and it doesn't have a lot of sweetness. There is some sweet fruitiness to it for sure, but it's not strong. It's very powerfully smoky and powerfully bitter. But it's very, very smooth. Very, very smooth. There's smoke in there. Considering it is peated, that means that the malted barley was dried with peat smoke. I'm not tasting a strong peatiness. There is a hint of that Lafroig style medicinal bitterness, but not that really salty peatiness that I'm used to from your Islay malts. That said, it is very complex and rich in flavor. But it is bitter. So people who prefer a sweeter, more fruity and vanilla-y, citrusy whiskey, like some of your typical speysides, this is probably not your whiskey, but it is really good. So now I'm going to give the Snifter a try on the taste test. It does smell better from this. I've resisted buying one of these because, excuse me, I did not like how they came to hand. They just felt a little bit poncy, and I like the whole culture of drinking from a tumbler. But this does bring out a lot of fragrance that was not apparent in the tumbler. Tastes the same. All about the nose. I mean, it makes sense. Your tongue is still your tongue. The glass doesn't change the way your tongue works. What is important with fine glassware and crystal is always that thin. Now you get some very thin cheap glassware, but it's incredibly weak. Crystal tends to be thinner, and a thinner glassware deposits the liquid more evenly onto your tongue. So you think of a thick bead on some glassware. The liquid tends to go and pour out in a single jet, and that places it entirely onto one point on your tongue, which doesn't really allow it to travel properly around your mouth for you to appreciate all the flavor. Thinner glassware feels better on your lips, and it deposits the liquid more widely onto your tongue, and therefore it tastes better. There's probably some science and research done about it, but it definitely makes a difference. And if you're drinking from cheap, thick glassware, upgrade. Okay, so now we're going to add a bit of water, because I have been told that this whiskey tastes better with water, and I've had this whiskey for a few months. I haven't tried it with water yet, so let's have a play. Those who have seen my previous videos will be pleased to note I now have a vaguely civilized pipette. So putting a few drops into each. See if it frees up anything. I can smell the oak so powerfully now from this. The oak is really strong. Oak and smoke, that's about all I'm getting, but it's really freed up a lot of that woody note. Take a breath and let's try the Snifter. And the same, the oak has really come to the fore, and it is beautiful. There's also a hint of citrus now, which wasn't present before. I'm actually going to put a bit more in. I feel like it's only just started to come alive with that little drop of water, and I'm going to put in a few more drops because this is a very complex whiskey, and I think it could probably give us a bit more. So now I've put in a good 5 or 6 drops from my pipette of North Warwickshire's finest tap water. Yeah, this is actually better. It is an oily whiskey. It's not very strong. It's 43% alcohol, so the alcohol content isn't that high, but it is very oily, and I think the water is helping to free up some of those phenols. That's making it a lot more interesting in fragrance, and really that wood, it's like I'm smelling somebody sawing through a barrel right now. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's tamed it a little bit. There was a little bit of bitterness that was probably not very pleasant. Kind of like taking a bite out of a cigar. It was rich and interesting, but probably just a little bit too sharp. This now, I feel it's coming into its own. I can taste a little bit of licorice, some saltiness. This whiskey is definitely better with a drop of water for sure. That woody aroma is just beautiful now that it's freed up. I wouldn't even say it's very oaky. It smells more like a packaging crate that's been sawn. It's very resinous. It's beautiful. That was very good. Let's try this one. So there's some beautiful floral notes now that I never noticed before. The citrus is slightly less present in here than it is in there, but this makes a big difference for nosing. I am a convert. I'm sorry for anybody who I offended previously, but this is the way to do it. It's mainly just the wood and the smoke. I've mentioned whiskies to take camping before. This would be one of those. This would really go down well around the campfire. The outdoorsy whiskey, this. But it's also beautifully complex and deserves to be appreciated from good glassware as well. I'm glad the bitterness has reduced. It's still very leathery and tanniny and is bitter, but I feel it's come a long way, and I think this one challenges you a little bit. It's not a whiskey that I think people will easily appreciate if they're not used to drinking a lot of whiskey. I think they might find it a little bit too bitter, a little bit too serious, a little bit too old perhaps, and maybe it is a classic whiskey. I think a lot of my friends say that they don't drink whiskey because it's something that old men drink and it's too bitter and it's not what they like. And this is probably that kind of whiskey. This is not something that's young, hip, trendy whiskey. This is a very traditional drink. And that's no bad thing if you love whiskey. It's a really complex, challenging drink that'll make you think a bit, and takes a little bit of effort to really get the best out of this. But if you give it some time and get to know it, it does start telling you its secrets. And it's got some good secrets. Thanks, guys. Come again.